This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include J. Brad Crone, political consultant, John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and former legislator Connie Wilson. This week on NC Spin, we're going to talk about the budget and Governor Cooper's proposal. And we're going to also talk about why HB2 isn't going away, and a recent poll showing 55% of those surveyed think public education is headed in the wrong direction. And as always, we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. Governor Cooper released the budget proposals this week, and we want our panel to talk about them. Connie Wilson, Governor Cooper proposes a $23.4 billion budget for the next fiscal year, a 5.1% increase in spending. He says the budget's fiscally responsible, includes no tax or fee increases, nor does it make any drastic spending cuts. With our state economy up and improving, do you think this is a reasonable increase, and more importantly, how's it going to be received by the legislature?
Well, you can tell from reading the document that there's a lot of homework that went into it. There's very good programs that are being funded at that 5.8% increase level. That is dramatically higher than we've had in the past. And the Republican legislature really looks at budgets from a macro standpoint. They like to put money into reserves. They do tax cuts. I think it's from an initial start, it's a very good budget, but you'll see a tremendous change in focus as you come to the General Assembly.
Brad, Charlie Peruz, the state budget officer, says it's sound, stating that between reversions, the budget surplus, and revenue growth, it's a sound proposal. Legislative leaders immediately responded, said it was a return to the Easley-Purdue era of spending increases. They say their target is more like 2.8%. We're going to have a tug of war here between these two factions?
I don't think it's going to be very much of a tug of war. You've got supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. I don't think they're going to pay very much attention to what Governor Cooper has to say.
Well, but Chris, Governor Cooper has something that Governor McCrory did not often use, and that is a bully pulpit to try to drum up support. Do you think that can help him?
Oh, I think it can help him a lot if he goes around the state and sells it, and there's a lot in there to sell. For example, finally eliminating the waiting list for at-risk 4-year-olds for NC pre-K. Why would we not want to help them with a program we know that works? Connie mentions that the legislature likes to put money in reserve. There's $300 million in the rainy day fund, $100 million statutorily going to the hurricane relief fund, $150 million going to the liability that we've talked about for state insurance and retirees. I think what he said, I thought very forcefully at his press conference, is this is a budget that tries to catch up in education because we've been doing it piecemeal at a time. We have given teachers a raise, but we're last in principal pay. So he tries to do these things at one time when we do have money, and there's no tax increase in here, and there's no fee increase, which is a hidden tax increase. He does it, and he still puts money in savings. I think it's overdue.
John, let's get to some specifics. One of his proposals would give tax credits for child care to parents, a way he says will help working North Carolinians. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think that it wouldn't be unreasonable to increase North Carolina's per child tax credit, but Governor Cooper in his budget simply reinstates an old child care tax credit that is not wisely thought out. You know, this is a good example. I truly think, and this is not an insult, that Governor Cooper's budget is a political document. As Brad says, it's not, he has no illusions it's going to be passed by the General Assembly. He's trying to articulate his political views on a variety of subjects using the budget, and this is one of them. Interestingly, though, as Chris says, in his political message as the new governor of North Carolina, I think perhaps it's surprisingly and shockingly to some of his Democratic allies, he didn't raise taxes, he didn't rescind any of the tax cuts. He puts a lot of money into savings. I think we should put more, but he does put a lot of money into savings. And remember a few months ago when he said we were saving too much? Now he wants to put several $100 million more into savings.
Well, $300 million. Connie, one of his proposals talks about raises. He's proposing pay hikes of 5% for the next 2 years for teachers, 6.5% for principals. And he's going to give state employees a 2% pay bump or $800, whichever is higher, and a one-time bonus. Is he laying down the gauntlet here for the legislators?
to try to make them look bad. I'll tell you what I was pleased about with that was that the state employees were getting a long overdue pay raise. We always hear about teachers. That's the sexy issue to talk about. That's what politicians are willing to fund. But I do believe that there's strong support in the General Assembly for the state employees. And you're right, there's probably going to be, I don't think you really negotiate between the governor's office and the legislature. It's going to be negotiations between the House and the Senate. That's what we're really looking at. And there's strong interest there for those teacher pay raises.
Chris, one of the proposals that he made was, I think, near and dear to your heart. You've talked about it a lot on this show in times past, and that's what he calls the best and brightest scholarships, giving $10,000 to young people who are willing to enter the teaching profession in exchange for them making a commitment they'll teach in our public schools. Number one, is it enough, and what do you think of it?
Well, I don't know if it's enough, but I think it's a good start. And ever since we abandoned the Teaching Fellows program, and then we find ourselves with a teacher shortage, I do think there's support in the General Assembly for a teacher scholarship program. This is a good first step. I wish they would do this, but they may do something smaller, they may do something targeted, but I think the governor deserves credit for putting this on the table. I think he has a good plan.
And Brad, another one of the recommendations, which is probably going to draw a lot of fire from legislators, is his proposal to phase out the voucher program, the opportunity scholarships. He says this will improve accountability in education in North Carolina. Any chance for that one?
Well, again, it's political argumentation on behalf of the governor. I think he makes a valid point that there needs to be more oversight and accountability in our charter school system. But the Republicans have no interest in eliminating the voucher program. They're actually saying they want to double down on more school choice.
Is this one of his negotiating points? I'll give up this one if you'll...
Well, no, I don't think it's a negotiating point again, because it goes back to what Connie said. The negotiating will be done between the House and the Senate.
You know what's interesting about the voucher issue and the school choice is that other countries, other industrialized nations have way more school choice than we do. And we keep looking at how those other countries do academically superior than we do. And really giving school choice and opportunity is important for North Carolina.
John, the governor wants to expand Medicaid, even though the legislature passed a law saying that he couldn't. But it's got a little bit of a different twist to it. He wants the state's hospitals to pay the additional share of North Carolina's cost for Medicaid. Now, he says he's talked with hospital executives that they'll actually save money, actually make money on this deal, because they're going to reduce the number of emergency room visits that they've got, and that in addition to that, the hospitals will actually be receiving Medicaid money from the federal government. Can he get the legislature to go along with this?
Well, thinking that hospitals will pay the Medicaid
He says other
rate
states have done this.
is sort of like thinking that Mexicans will pay for the border wall. It's a wonderful thing to say. It has no relationship to reality whatsoever. Hospital executives certainly know that Medicaid does not reduce emergency room visits. It increases emergency room visits.
But they'll be on Medicaid.
But they'll be paid for it.
Yeah.
Of course they want more money. The point here is that when you and the hospitals pay, somebody else is paying. It is a form of cost shifting. That's inevitable in any situation. If it is a state appropriation in any way or any kind of encumbrance, it's got to go through the legislature. They're not going to do it.
But Tom, it's premature. Medicaid reform in North Carolina is premature because you've got to wait on the federal government. The Republicans in Congress are going to put together a Medicaid reform plan. They were meeting last Wednesday and Thursday. I think you're going to have to wait to see what the Trump administration does on block grants for the states before you can adequately address that.
That's absolutely right. This entire debate is irrelevant now because the terms in which Medicaid is going to be delivered in the future might very well change the legislature's view about Medicaid.
So is it just political populism?
Not really. This is a concept that Representative Donnie Lambeth out of Forsyth County, who's a former hospital administrator, he's in the House, he's one of our HHS co-chairs, has been pushing this issue. So I don't think it's a dead issue. I think you may see a bill filed on this with some Republicans on it this year.
Chris, you talked about the fact the governor's putting $350 million into reserves after having said before he thought we were putting too much in. But he's also spending money to update state-owned buildings, one of Governor McCrory's pet projects from years ago. And he suggested he might come forward with a statewide bond proposal later. What's your reactions to these?
Well, I think we do need I think Governor McCrory was right about our state infrastructure. Interestingly, the governor calls for spending money to update the legislative office building. Maybe that'll be one of the projects that the General Assembly will have some interest in. I want to get one thing in on the Medicaid. We keep saying how it's been a bad idea. I think the fact that there's uncertainty, that the state, if it's still available, should go ahead and do it. And it's worth remembering that Mike Pence expanded Medicaid and Chris Christie expanding Medicaid. This is not some liberal idea all the time. There's a very valid argument for this, and I think Cooper's right to make it, whether it happens or not.
Brad, you've been interested in economic development issues, particularly in the rural part of our state, and the governor's proposal would put $20 million into what he calls NC-ready sites for rural areas, $20 million to expand broadband internet connections into the rural areas, and another $10 million into the Golden Leaf Foundation. Will these really help the rural areas of our state?
I think they will. I think that's a very positive step that the governor took when it comes to economic development and economic stabilization for rural eastern North Carolina and western North Carolina. It is a good step forward.
All right. Johnny also talked about putting $233 million over the next 2 years into road building and transportation, and another $185 million into maintenance project. Will this, coupled with what we already have in transportation budget, help relieve some of the backlogs?
I think it's important for folks to remember we tend to get frustrated that nothing ever happens and we talk about the same issues for years and no one ever fixes the problem. When we talk about transportation funding, there has been a dramatic increase in the amount of money spent on road construction and road maintenance in the last several years. Dramatic. And anybody who's driven recently around North Carolina will see that some of these projects coming into fruition are really having an effect on traffic and access.
All right, I want to go around the table in just a few seconds that we've got left and get your summarization and final thoughts on the governor's budget proposals. Chris, I'll start with you.
I think it's a good step in the right direction. You didn't ask us for a grade, but I think it's a B+ budget. It literally makes education a priority across the board, not just on one individual part of education. I think and it helps families. I think it's a budget that takes us in the right direction.
Connie?
I think it's a budget that the Republican legislature will, as you've been hearing already, is saying it's too much growth. And if you keep doing this every year, in a few years, we're going to have this major problem. So it's already being set up that there's going to be reductions to what's been spent. But as an initial budget coming out with the items that Governor Cooper ran on, it's exactly what he said he was going to do, and he's funded it properly.
Brad Crone.
I think the administration gets an A.
Let me interrupt first. Would you give him a grade on the budget? What grade?
I would probably give him a B.
All right.
I would give him an A, and I'll say why. Because from a structural standpoint of when he came into office the first week of January to right now, they have busted their behinds to get this budget pulled together. It is a political document. It does reflect his political agenda. I think it's a good start for him.
John.
It's a no new taxes budget, so I'm feeling generous. I'll give him a C.
And that's generous, huh? All right. We thank you for watching NC Spin on the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and my weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. When we come back, HB2 lingers on.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The slogan on our family farm is growing the next generation. It means using innovative technology to conserve water and increase yields. It embodies our passion for providing food and fiber for our neighbors near and far. It represents our desire to take care of our employees, our land, and to leave a better place for our children. Farm life isn't easy, but it's a good life, and I love what I do.
North Carolina is a great state with great assets.
Among them are 180,000 state employees.
Our legislators are considering important decisions regarding working conditions,
Health insurance,
retirement benefits,
and pay for state employees.
Scenic is the one voice at the table when those decisions are being considered.
Scenic is revitalized and refocused.
A stronger Scenic ensures a more effective voice.
Learn more at www.scenic.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
It's well known legislative leaders would love to see HB2 go away, but as we begin March, solutions continue to evade us. Brad Crone, a longtime viewer, asked me last week, why do we keep continuing to devote so much time on our show talking about HB2? Speculating it's the liberal media and Democrats who are beating the drum and only make the problem worse. How would you answer that viewer?
Well, I would answer the viewer that it's more than just about a bathroom bill. It's about discrimination. It's about legislating discrimination. It's about $300 million plus in economic damages that have been done to the state. And it's about the reputational impact, the black eye that the state of North Carolina has taken by passing this terrible bill.
Connie, last week when Governor Cooper proposed his budget, he talked for a moment or two about HB2, and he said that this new bill, HB 186, which is being bandied about the legislature, is little more than HB 2.1 or 2.2. Is he right?
I would disagree there. To get to the point where they actually have a bill that's being debated in the Republican caucuses that makes the changes that it makes is a big deal. And in politics, there's always compromise that occurs. You just start out with, one person starts out with a draft, somebody else has their draft, and you usually meet in the middle. So it's not a line.
Cooper says that if Speaker Moore and Senate President Pro Tem Berger would put the thing on the floor for a vote, it would be passed or repealed, actually. Can they do this with a simple majority vote?
Sure, they could repeal it with a majority vote, but neither Republican leader wants to take a bill that the majority of their caucus doesn't support to the floor unless they're certain it's going to pass. One quick thing, the debate is no longer about bathrooms, and I think a lot of people have missed this. Representative McGrady's bill, which the Democrats say they'll support if you take out the referendum, which they require, like local governments will have, bathrooms are out of it. The state, that bill reserves the right for bathrooms and public facilities for the state. This is no longer about bathrooms. Republicans won't yield on discrimination against LGBT people in employment and public accommodations. Bathrooms are almost off the table, and the Republicans still won't give any.
John, I know you've been working behind the scenes a lot over the last year or so to see this bill go away. Is there any reason to believe that anything's going to happen anytime soon?
It's possible. Chris a little bit overstates the point about bathrooms. The new bill, House Bill 186, which I support as a possible answer, reserves to the state the authority to do that. It actually doesn't have any kind of a standard, and some Republicans are concerned that it doesn't solve the bathroom problem. I disagree with them, but they do say that. I think there are some other possibilities. If the referendum becomes an unworkable idea, by the way, they can negotiate the terms of the referendum, how hard it would be to get on the ballot or something like that. But if that doesn't work, I would suggest another way to bring along some of the folks in the legislature would be, they've already got exclusions for religious institutions and for nonprofits regarding city anti-discrimination ordinances. Why not exclude the provision of wedding-related services? That's usually the example conservatives give where they're concerned that the state or the local government shouldn't be compelling people to do things that are against their religious views. Just exclude religious wedding-related services. It's a small amount of businesses, and I think you might get somewhere.
All right, we're going to take a break, and after we come back, we're going to talk about, or ask the question, is public education headed in the wrong direction?
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you, not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
A High Point University poll recently surveyed people about public education. 55% of those polled said public education is headed in the wrong direction. 71% said they would favor a bond referendum to build new schools. 84% said teachers are paid too little, and 77% say they'd be willing to pay more taxes to get teacher pay up to the national average. John Hood, why do so many people say public education is headed in the wrong direction?
Because they were asked on a poll that question, and I have seen that kind of question asked for decades and get the same answer. Almost all of these answers are very similar to what you always get.
I saw the question.
If you ask people cold, should teachers be paid more, you get a huge number. If you tell people what teachers are paid and then ask them, you get a smaller number. You ask people, would you pay more taxes to fund more teacher salaries? Large numbers will say yes. If you say, how much would you pay? $100 more? Oh, no. So you have to be very careful about the question wording if you want to be serious about this issue.
I talked to Martin Kiefer, the head of the High Point poll, this week about this, and I read the actual questions. By the way, the 55% number is the same as, roughly the same as it was for the past 2-3 years.
Right.
So it hasn't changed very much during that period of time. Those surveys said they would favor a statewide bond referendum. Chris, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that there are people who correctly perceive that our schools have a lot of funding issues. They've seen teacher assistants go away. They've seen classes not offered in some counties because there's not enough textbooks. And I remember one mountain county couldn't have an AP class because there weren't textbooks around. They see teachers leaving. The perception is, and I think rightly, a lot of places we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough facilities, and that's what I think these answers reflect.
But school buildings are traditionally the local system's
No,
authority.
but once in a while we'll have a humongous bond bill every 10 or 12 years, and it'll pass. But I will say this about the 70-some-odd% that support a tax increase. Those referendums at the ballot never pass. So I don't know where those 77% are located.
Quickly, Tom, some research that we did a couple weeks ago, focus group research, the state lottery contributions to school funding, a big question mark for voters. They want to know where it's going. Absolutely.
One of the things that they were asked is, would you be willing to see more funding going for pre-K, English language learners, and exceptional children? They said yes, they would be willing to do that, Brad.
Well, I think that's a very good step in the right direction. I would also submit to you that there's a growing movement among voters for more school choice. And I think that's a real bitter pill for Democrats to swallow, but it is a political reality.
Connie, one of the other things they said was that they'd like local schools given the flexibility to arrange their school schedules to coincide with community colleges and universities, as opposed to the state doing it. What does that tell you?
Well, it's interesting about the poll results, because that was the last bill that I passed back in 2004 when I left the General Assembly. And what we saw at that time were overwhelming numbers. The flip side, I think, again, it's how you ask that question. Most people like starting school the end of August.
I will have to tell you, I read the questions in the poll. I thought they were fairly well worded and fairly evenly put, like the one on the, do you think North Carolina's public education is headed in the right direction, wrong direction,
but on this
or not
issue, I'll
sure?
give you, back before this law was put in place, schools were starting mostly the first week of August. If you'd asked them that question, they might have answered differently.
All right. After these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
North Carolina is a great state with great assets.
Among them are 180,000 state employees.
Our legislators are considering important decisions regarding working conditions,
Health insurance,
retirement benefits,
and pay for state employees.
Scenic is the one voice at the table when those decisions are being considered.
Scenic is revitalized and refocused.
A stronger Scenic ensures a more effective voice.
Learn more at www.scenic.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
All right, this is the part of the show so many of us look forward to when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. They tee off and talk about what they want. Brad Crone, I'll start with you.
Well, Tom, I think the governor's budget actually put money into the court system, which I've been a big advocate for. You're seeing IT spending. I think you also see Chief Justice Martin's raise the age element come out of the General Assembly. There is momentum building there.
All right. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
I'm going to answer a slightly different question. What do none of us know? And that is what's going to happen with redistricting. The U.S. Supreme Court just sent back a redistricting case in Virginia back down to the district court in a kind of a strange set of decisions and concurrences and dissents that didn't give very much guidance other than to say that North Carolina's districts are not yet clearly in trouble at the Supreme Court, and we will not probably get any resolution of our redistricting cases for some time to come.
Even though there's a proposed legislation in the General Assembly to go to an impartial redistricting commission.
Yeah.
Being discussed. Chris, tell us something we don't know.
Well, the tinkering about our court system is going to continue. I think it is good the governor put some funding in there, but there's a bill that's been introduced in the State House to reduce the number of Court of Appeals judges to 12. We just made those races partisan again. The Republicans took over the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court is very contentious. I think it's getting a little alarming how often we're trying to change the composition, the makeup, the partisanship, and how our court system works just willy-nilly every year in the legislature, but it doesn't look like it's going to stop.
Which, of course, will require an amendment to the Constitution.
Not to reduce the number of justices.
Not to reduce it.
No, not to reduce it.
I was trying to dovetail into the fact that my column this week deals with amending our Constitution and recommends, by the way, a statewide study instead of piecemeal. Connie Wilson, tell us something we don't know.
Something exciting that's been brewing for years and years. Representative Marilyn Avila worked on it for several years and now picking up the banner as he was working with Representative Avila was Representative Dwayne Hall and Representative Chuck McGrady on Raise the Age. It's extremely important for these juveniles who have committed nonviolent crimes to be able to have a new system that they can go through besides an adult system to lower recidivism.
And the raising the age raises it to age 18 to be tried as an adult instead of 16.
Thank you for helping me out.
And Governor Cooper put money in the budget for it.
And you'll see that with the House and Senate also.
All right. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.